How's it going, everybody? This is Dailies to Downloads. My name is Chad. With me is Eric. And this week, we are going to talk to you about the Oscar ceremony, the Academy Awards. The 93rd Academy Awards took place at Union Station yesterday as we record this. And you might be seeing this episode a little bit earlier than normal, but that's only because we want to get this hot content out there. Right, Eric?
We had to tell, I know people are waiting. They're forming their own opinion, but they still need a little extra advice. And so we're here to really give that concrete yay or nay on the ceremony.
That's right. And so, yes, the Oscars took place at Union Station and it went on at 8 o'clock. And obviously, there have been some divisive opinions about the ceremony. And we will get to some of those as we go along here. But let's start with the ratings, which I had said for many weeks, at least in my household, if not to Eric, that this was the thing I was most interested in seeing, is what the ratings would be, given the current situation we're in with the pandemic and how weird the movie releasing platforms have been this, past year and a half. So let's go back to 2014. 43.7 million people viewed the Oscars in 2014. And from there, it was a steady decline until now. In 2021, 9.8 million people viewed the Oscars. That is a 58% drop in ratings. To suffice to say that it was not the number that they were looking for. It was ratings wise, that is a disaster in every way. And we will probably touch on some of the reasons why here as we go forward with our discussion. So let's just start in chronological order, shall we? The opening shot, Eric, was Regina King making her long way, to the main event area, I guess. And
if the whole ceremony would have been one continuous long take, that would have been awesome. The entire, they even did it when she was walking in and they had the credits like a Soderbergh kind of movie.
Right.
Kind of thing. I'm like, oh, if we just continue that, I'm like, all right, I'm at least intrigued by this long.
Right. I was too. Yeah, I was like, okay, she wasn't the host, but she opened it, and it was an intriguing way, as you said, to open the ceremony, and then, it took a nosedive really, really fast. You saw right away that there was a change in how they were monitoring the speeches, and they weren't really. They were kind of giving people basically as much time as they needed to talk. But on top of that, unfortunately, the speeches kind of get the most criticism when in fact what paved the way was the comments about the nominees, each of the nominees, before the winner was announced. And you didn't really see film clips, not that many anyway. You just have the presenter talking about each of the nominees for much longer than they need to. And then they just all of a sudden tell you who the winner is. And then the person gets up and speaks for as long as they feel like. And it was a very slow, dragging way to start the ceremony, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it was definitely noticeable, at least after a few of those speeches and everything, where like there was no live orchestra,
Right.
and that was very apparent, and not just because of how they usually will play off someone who's taking too long, but I do feel like music in general, as like kind of like underscoring a speech or whatever, is also a part of the telecast, and all
Yeah,
that
it
was gone.
certainly adds a layer of class, I think is a good word.
Something, yeah. I feel like the orchestra is only brought up when it's about getting someone off the stage, but it also plays other parts throughout the ceremony. And having that completely gone became noticeable as the night kind of continued on.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, a part of me likes the idea of not having people played off, but it also, like you said, like the introductions for each category felt also a little like off the cuff in a way, even if they were heavily scripted. I feel like for a shorts category, Laura Dern or Reese Witherspoon was talking about how like, oh, and he likes chocolate, blah blah blah, and I'm like, what are we doing? Are we just reading like dating profiles of each of the nominees? Like, it was weird. Like, in lieu of actual clips of the films that they represent, we were
Right.
getting this really corny trivia, really kind of
Right.
cheap trivia that was not adding anything, and it was not telling us anything about the movies that they were nominated for.
Exactly. And, I don't know how many people are like this, but certainly as I was growing up and getting more into movies, the clips are one of the things that intrigued me to see said movies. So without that, you just get two people talking to each other. And, we're not really, if you're not familiar with each and every movie, you're not really sure why you should care right away.
Yeah, and also like that the fact that they had clips once in a while,
Right.
like international film
Animated,
and something else.
animated. Yeah.
Yeah, like, so that was confusing too. So it's like, who made the decision of what to include clips with and what not to? Especially, you would think the acting categories would be most in need of clips, and but they didn't do that. So it just seemed really, really strange. And even some of the tech categories, even if in the past we'd get sketches of costumes for the costume category,
Right.
or um, like for the screenwriting category, sometimes we'd actually get a piece of like a page of the screenplay and they would read it out. It may be a little corny, but at least it added some extra context. Here, it just kind of felt very, yeah, it felt very off the cuff in a way that didn't really benefit the presentation and the momentum, whatever momentum it was trying to have by the second hour.
Right. Um, no, yeah, I absolutely agree. And I will say, this might be the small bit of praise for how the ceremony was directed, but I thought that they did an okay job incorporating the zooms. Like,
Oh
because
yeah,
because so many of the
yeah.
parts were awkward, you didn't really pay attention to the zooms, and they seem to all go off pretty smoothly as far as that goes. So I can't complain about that from a technology standpoint. It seemed like they had that under control.
Yeah, and I guess for that, rather than having a Zoom of each nominee in their own specific house, whatever, they had designated satellite locations.
Areas,
So
right?
you would be in London for like the BFI and stuff like that, and then I think in Paris and in
And
Prague, like
still dressed
some of
up,
them almost.
so there was still like a sophistication to the way it was being presented, but, to kind of keep that sort of aura of the Oscars going.
Yeah, exactly. So it felt like they had everything prepared, so there would be no buffering or people muted by accident. I don't think the Australians and Sacha Baron Cohen were actually in front of that bridge, based on the lighting. It didn't. I think that was a fake background, but nonetheless, yeah, I think that was all pretty smooth. Sometimes when you had to toggle very quickly between continents in real time,
Yeah,
I was a little disoriented as to where we were,
right.
because I think all the theaters had like very red chairs, and so
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
I was a little confused at times where we were in the world. But outside of just one category where a team of like five people won, four of them went on stage in LA, but they chose the guy who was like in Prague to
Right.
give the speech.
Yeah,
So they
yeah,
all stood there like they were being auctioned off or something. It was weird. Outside of that, it was no technical snafus there.
right.
Yeah.
And you know what? Getting back to the speeches just for a second, like, obviously, you and I being big wrestling fans, what I thought of with the speeches is that, yes, and I agreed with everything you said. Like, on one hand, you like people being able to talk a little bit longer, but at the same time, as with a wrestling show, it needs to flow. There needs to be some structure. There needs to be somebody behind the scenes saying, okay, time to wrap it up, or, you're fine, or whatever. And, like on a wrestling show, if a match goes too long, then other people might get kicked off the card. So they might not be represented as much. And so here you had certain signs of that, especially later on with the in memoriam segment, which we'll get to. But it's a whole other issue. But yeah, so yeah, there needed to be some sort of a structure there. So moving on to some of the other moments, we're not going to list all the nominees and the winners. That you're not looking at this show to give you
Yeah.
that. There are plenty of articles out there for that. So we're just gonna touch on some of the things.
Sorry, just thinking one other thing I missed in terms of the flow was that like having a announcing like each best picture nominee throughout the telecast. That was something like someone would come out and have some minimal relation to a certain best picture nominee and
Right.
present it, throughout the so that at the end of the night you had heard about all eight or whatever, and that became noticeably absent as well the longer we went on. By
Right.
hour three, I guess.
Right. And one of the things we haven't really touched on yet is that you look at the ratings, and people obviously, to a certain degree, you have to take into consideration that this is a pandemic situation. There's not as much star power in the room. There's not really as many moving huge standing ovation type things, and they're in a different place. So obviously a lot of that can be taken into consideration to a certain extent, but that's not why the ratings were down. And another reason the ratings were some people will say the ratings were down, and I disagree with this. So it's going to be a little bit of a rant here, and that is I hate the argument that, oh, there wasn't as many popular movies nominated this year, so that's why people didn't watch. And I hate that excuse. And it's like, this isn't like a popularity contest, really. Like, not in the sense of like every movie that everybody saw needs to be nominated. Like, I can't say that there would have been too many differences in a normal year. Like, would No Time to Die be nominated for Best Picture? you know,
Yeah.
Probably not. But so I hate when people say that kind of stuff, because the reason this the ratings were down here, you can probably say a little bit of it had to do with the pandemic. Maybe some people didn't know where to see certain movies. I could buy that. But if anybody checked in, I would almost love to see the minute by minute or the like ratings, because if people checked into the beginning of this ceremony, I guarantee they changed the channel. I guarantee,
Yeah.
like, when they saw those, like, the rambling on talks and stuff, I guarantee they were tuned out.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, as to the ratings thing, I think as we talked about for on the kind of previewing the ceremony to come that just happened, it's like I feel like the day after the Oscars is always like a big. That's its own industry complaining about the ratings, and it's how
Right.
and I feel like the Oscars get attacked more for that. You don't hear about like how is the NFL going to bring in new audiences for the Super Bowl? How is it? You don't hear these things, you know. So I find it weird that we got to go to Johnny Coca-Cola to bring into the Oscars. Where I always found that was, and also most people watch clips after the fact. They don't watch it live anymore. Like it's
Right. If
2021,
that
so
becomes
like
more popular, then yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's like we finally gotten to a point now where we include in like music album sales, digital downloads, and whatever. And like TV has always been about like 10 years behind. So yeah, I think more people are probably watching clips now about the Oscars today as opposed to we're sitting on Sunday night watching at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it's such an outdated model of judging success based
Right,
on
it
a
is. And by the same token, you look at anything where people view clips. Yes, these industries, these companies need to do is they need to adapt to these changes. Like, so if a lot of people are watching clips, if I were in charge, the first thing I'd want to say is, okay, what can we do to make our TV, our slot, must watch? Like, what can we do to have people absolutely tuning in and not just watching clips on YouTube or on their news recap show the next day? And they didn't do that here. They made a lot of changes, but they didn't do that here. And so
it's
one of the
hard. Yeah, yeah,
one
yeah.
of the things I'll say right away is the rearranging of the order of the awards being presented was one of the more noticeable things to me. And on the surface, if you're going to rearrange the order, okay, but it should have a point, or there should be a meaning behind it. And some of them, like, you could argue that the last one, there was probably a meaning behind that one. However,
definitely, yeah.
opening with screenplays, to me, was not the wisest choice. Like, they always start with supporting actress, right, Eric?
one of the acting categories, one of the
Right,
supporting categories. Yeah.
because that will pull you in. Like, oh wow,
Yeah.
so and so won. But they didn't do that here. They rearranged the order in a really odd way, to the point where you're kind of thrown off, especially by the end. What did you think about the order of awards?
Ye- Yeah, I think that's where too. Like, I actually I don't mind. I think this is like the third year where we haven't had a host.
Right.
And I don't necessarily mind not having a host because that was also something that was always next day criticized about how bad that host was, and the
And I
same.
agree, but I guarantee that changes next year.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
Mark
But
my
but
words.
I do think it,
The Rock is probably gonna get a call.
so, hey, why not? I mean, but it did feel weird in this instance where they also relied very much on having an individual present two awards that were somewhat like paired together. So
Right.
it'd be like animated short and animated feature will both be Reese Witherspoon or whatever.
Right.
And so you'd have them on the dais for like 10 minutes. And and Regina King, I feel like that was like because she was also kind of introducing us to the show, but then also giving out the two screenplay awards. So I feel like she was on stage for like 15 minutes. Or it felt
No, it was. I
long.
checked the time. It was like by the time the commercial ended after she presented those awards, it was like 15, 20 minutes by the time she was done.
Yeah,
And it felt like an hour had gone by.
yeah, yeah. It definitely felt weird because they had to do so much about like why we're having the show, why you're not going to see people wearing masks, why you're not, and so it was almost like these disclaimers that they had to like get ahead of so that they weren't criticized for having this show at all in person. And then on top of that, yeah, the ordering I think was just a little odd in terms of we'll talk about the ending, but then also um, it was an instance where the best director was like the eighth award of the night,
Right.
which is weird. I don't mind necessarily having that earlier in the show, but I think it's still weird, especially when Chloe Zhao was also nominated for editing.
Yeah.
And if she would have won editing after winning director, I feel like that would have been anticlimactic and strange.
Right.
Like what would she have talked about then? Like,
Right.
like it would have been, and yeah, it just would have been weird, and it felt a little haphazard into how they were. That decision felt less thought out than the one that they thought they were building towards with the emotional climax
Right.
that didn't happen. But yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Um, so yeah, you know what? Let's one award that I was surprised by. There were a few, but one of the awards I was surprised by was best cinematography. That went to Mank, and obviously the cinematography in the movie is really good. I think a lot of people would have expected Nomadland to take that one, but was that one you had on your Oscar poll there, Eric, or did?
So technically no, because I expected Mank to be this year's 0 for 10 movie.
Instead, Trial of the Chicago Seven got completely shut out.
Yes, that got shut out, which yeah, that got was 0 for 6. And I feel like we always get one that is like a the biggest loser. That like even like the Irishman, I think had like 10 or 11 lost, didn't have any.
Right.
Gangs of New York, blah blah. So I expected Mank to go that route, but I mean the American Society of Cinematographers, people were talking about today. 2 years ago, 2 weeks ago, they gave Eric Messerschmidt their main award, and so there were signs of that. And it being black and white is always a thing.
Right. Absolutely.
So it was I don't know, maybe not like a giant shock, but definitely not
Right.
the front runner, probably.
Yeah, that's probably a better way of saying it. Like, I if I was going to vote for one and two, Mank would probably be my number two in this room.
Yeah. It's definitely the showiest out, and Nomadland with its like Malik like.
Right.
I guess those are the two showiest, and those would
And
have been.
shockingly enough, he wasn't there, Terrence Malick.
Oh, he was wearing two masks, one over the bottom of his face and the other over the top, and then yeah,
Nobody knew. Yeah.
yeah, he was a part of the Oscar trivia segment. You just
How crazy would it have been if this was the one he decided to show at?
Can I present?
Oh man. Anyway, so let's get to before we get to more of the negative, let's talk about like if you had a favorite moment, Eric, what that would be. And I'll start. And surprisingly enough, and I guess this is more like not a best moment, but like a best speeches. Really, it could be, you can kind of loop in those in together. And I had two speeches that I liked. The grandmother from Minari gave a really good speech. It was funny. It was from the heart. I liked that one a lot. And as much as I'm shocked to say it, I thought Tyler Perry's speech was really
Yeah.
good, really solid. It was well thought out. He's a very good speaker as far as that goes. He really kind of commanded the attention of the audience, which was surely needed in that moment. So,
Yeah, yeah, and I think with Tyler Perry and yeah, to a lesser degree, Yoon Jong Yoon, who I guess probably expected to win, but you don't know for sure. But Tyler Perry was getting a tribute award, so he knew he was going to give
right.
a speech. So I felt like one of the reasons why that one was so significant is because he was able to like write it out.
Right. Yeah. Especially it being a humanitarian award.
Exactly. So like he was completely on script or whatever. It was really good. Yeah, it was really good what he was saying. But like he definitely could prep for it in a way
Right.
that that damn old age home didn't earlier the show. No. But so I would say in terms of speeches, Tyler Perry, yeah, and Yu Jun Yoon. I mean, there was something funny about um even though they showed the tables, there was no food being served, there were no drinks being served, but it just seemed like Daniel Kaluuya was getting like progressively more like wasted. Like every time, every time they gave him a mic, he would say something else. So everyone was like, "Oh, like it was
This is the
funny."
case of a speech going too long. Like like it got to a point where like he just kind of kept talking because he
It
felt
was
like
like an open mic night where
he's like, my mom and dad had sex, and it's like, okay, like you've run out of things to say now. It's-
I mean, I wonder if though last night was the first night he realized that about his parents.
I,
Yeah,
hey,
I mean,
all
yeah,
learn from the bees
we
sometimes.
all get to that realization one day in life and we have to deal with it. And then when by the time he showed up in the Oscar trivia segment, I feel like he was even more blazed. Like he was,
He was definitely having a good time in that moment. So you know what? Let's talk about that part. I think if that was at the beginning, that whole segment was near the beginning, I think the flow of the show would have been much different. The energy of the show would have been much different. At that point, you're just like, oh my gosh, this needs to get moving quicker. And in reality, it was a really funny, like nice little side track. Lil Rel Howery. I think I'm saying his name there correctly, but he's a very funny guy. And it was I thought it was funny, Andra Day, the way she commented on the Prince song, because I immediately thought in my head, I was like, that's a really good song. We would have heard about that being nominated.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Well,
it was funny. And of course, Glenn Close, dancing there was, you didn't expect to see that.
Sugar Baby and the Butt and School Days history. Yeah.
But I like that. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, as much as like I'll usually complain about like how those kind of segments are completely insignificant to the overall show, it did seem like some sort of off the cuff, even though it wasn't off the cuff, but it had a little bit looser feeling than the rest of it. So that was
Right.
nice to kind of just break away from everyone in their separate tables, keeping a distance and blah blah blah. It broke up that monotony where we didn't really have enough moments where there's usually one or two of those where it's the Ellen selfie with all the nominees or something like that, right? And it took us like about 2.5 hours to get to that here to get something that felt a little bit more sporadic and not
Right.
completely pre-planned. Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about another one of the surprises of the night, and that would be Best Actress. Frances McDormand came away with her third Oscar, so she is in rare company there. She's actually the one of two women who have won all three awards for Best Actress. Obviously, Katharine Hepburn has won four,
Four, yeah. Yeah.
but that's a very elite company, and she is the only person to win Best Acting Award and producer for Best Picture. So She was obviously great in the movie. I don't know how many people expected her to win. If I were picking myself, just personal opinions, I probably would have picked Carey Mulligan.
Mhm.
That's not who I picked on my pool. Like I actually thought Viola Davis was going to walk away with it at the end of the day because I thought that she had more momentum going in. But yeah, what did you think?
Uh, for her winning, I thought that was fine. I mean, there are two strands of like Frances McDormand, like we were talking about last week, where she's been nominated in 5 different decades, right? In
Yeah,
80s, 90s, and it was like wow, like, and now she has three lead acting Oscars, and yet I feel like they didn't happen by accident. They're good performances, but it does seem a little like right place, right time, I guess. In
a
that
very
rare,
unassuming person to win these three, and that's not a knock. Like her nature is just she's not the type of person that carries herself like a Katharine Hepburn would, or
no, yeah, yeah. I
or
mean,
Meryl Streep does to the. She's she does her roles, she puts everything into them, but she doesn't like to play the Hollywood game as much as other people do. And if you don't believe me, all you have to do is look at Joel Cohen, who I don't even know if he was fully conscious throughout
yeah,
the
yeah.
ceremony.
And
Like
then,
when she howled at the moon, it showed his face, and it was deadpan.
yeah, and so that was like, there are reasons where I feel like every time I hear a Frances McDormand speech, I then have to like Google certain things. So like the whole howling of the moon thing also had to do with like I'll say Michael Wolff or whatever, who was a sound guy on the movie,
Mm.
who last month committed suicide.
Oh wow!
Uh, and so it was actually like a tribute to him. But like you would not know that,
Right.
uh, or when she won for Three Billboards and she's like Freedom Rider, get that in the contract. And so, but like the context is not there. And so, like
Right.
her speeches are, she's a little. I mean, her and Joel Cohen, I think that's a perfect match. It's a little out there. So yeah, so it definitely feels like she's a great actress. I think it was probably, if we ever saw the results of the voting, probably very close. I couldn't tell you who the
It
who
had to
the
have been close. You wonder if like everybody kind of thinks about like, oh, what were they thinking when they voted? Like you had, aside from Frances McDormand, you had three other really strong contenders, and you wonder if people looked at like, oh, there's Andra Day, there's Carey Mulligan, there's Viola Davis. Oh man, they're all really so good. Who do I choose? I'll just choose Frances McDormand.
yeah.
Go for something different. Like I don't know. Like I have no idea, but like I imagine it would have been a hard choice. I mean, to pick there.
Yeah, I mean, and also the because of the order of the show, if she would have won, because I didn't think Nomadland was a lock to win Best Picture. So if she would have won Best Actress in the show first, that's like, oh wow, there is like a momentum there.
Right.
But because it won Best Picture, and then they announced those two lead acting categories. Then I was like, oh yeah, okay, sure. Like I guess Nomadland. We're also, due to the bigger field of nominees and stuff. I feel like we're never really gonna have again a giant behemoth. Like Nomadland won 3 Oscars.
It's the
Um,
most honored film of the night.
yeah, and
Yeah.
for three,
Yeah.
whereas I feel like a couple years ago it'd be like 8, 9, 10 Oscars, and I feel like now we've gotten away from that due to the expanded
More
Best
often than
Picture.
not, over the past decade, you'll see years like that, like where the
Yeah, I think.
honored film doesn't have that many. Like you were saying, I don't know if there. You never say never, but it's going to have to be a pretty special movie that captures that north of 10 nominations, let alone north of 10 wins.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why I didn't think Viola Davis, and obviously all these stats are meant to be broken. No one's really thinking these stats through when they're voting, but no film had ever won Best Lead Actor and Actress without being nominated for Best Picture. So Ma
Right.
Rainey started the night strong with like 2 awards and stuff.
Right.
I'm like, okay, like it's, but yeah, it didn't show across the board.
Right. And, Abby, you said that we had seen Best Picture, Best Director by the time Frances McDormand won. Altogether, 16 women won last night, which is a very good thing. Chloe Zhao is the second woman to win Best Director. First woman of Asian descent to win that, and that was really great to see. I expected her to win, and I'm glad to see. I was glad to see Nomadland win. Um, and so yeah, but when I saw Best Picture coming on, I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. I really did. It was really strange to me. And then you're processing the Frances McDormand shocker, and it's not over yet. Like in your head, you and I were texting, and
Yeah.
you kind of predicted everything that was going to come to pass, which I thought is funny. You think they're building towards this moment for
It had
Chadwick
to have
Boseman.
been. The only reason they would have done this was to build for that moment that ultimately didn't happen, but it
Yeah,
felt like
and that's obviously a big gamble. Like if you're building to a moment and you don't know for sure if that moment is going to happen the way you want it to,
Mhm.
I would have been the better safe than sorry approach. Because, and I was talking about this with somebody today, it seems like whenever the Oscars try to curb tradition in any way, it almost always flies back in their face.
Mhm.
And I don't get it. Like you said it, and everybody has said it in the articles I've read. If they had just left Nomadland to win at the end for Best Picture, a lot of these discussions wouldn't be taking place. We'd still be talking about the ratings, certainly, but you wouldn't be talking about the Chadwick Boseman stuff as much. But that's not what they did. They wanted to do this big tribute, I assume, to him, and Anthony Hopkins won, and it was 5 a.m. in Wales, and he at 83 was in bed.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest issue with that is one, if Chadwick Boseman had won, I think it still would have felt bad because you were assuming what was going to happen based on sentimentality of someone who was no longer with us, and it just felt like it was kind of gross emotional manipulation that was going to be taken um, and then when it didn't happen, then they looked terrible, and then that the man, which obviously you said, like he said weeks in advance he wasn't going to be there.
Right.
Anthony Hopkins isn't even there, and presented by Joaquin Phoenix, who doesn't want to be there.
Clearly, they didn't want to be there. And it's
It
like
was
that's part of the
like
tradition
disaster.
you understand. You understand why Joaquin Phoenix is presenting the award. But at the same time, you're ending your ceremony with a guy who has been so vocal over the years about the award shows and not wanting to be a part of that system. And he's like, Anthony Hopkins for the father, he's not here. See ya.
Yeah, yeah, and like I didn't mind. Typically in years past, it was the opposite sex winner
Right.
presented, and but this year they give the actor's going to give actor, actress going to give actress, which was fine. But even when I still thought Chadwick Boseman was going to win, I'm like, oh man, like Joaquin Phoenix is going to give it to Chadwick Boseman's widow, and he's just like an awkward guy and a weird dude. And then but again, it all went even more haywire once that didn't happen.
Right.
And then they just had to go to Questlove, who was like, all right, great night. It was like, and this is why I think they really did themselves that disservice, because again, there are these talks for it being the most diverse group of nominees, but I think it was still like a 90% white winning group, and like, and they could have, I don't know, hid that or change that if it didn't end with two elderly-ish, one definitely elderly, acting winners
Right.
of the certain
Two
Caucasian
veteran,
variety.
two veterans.
Veteran, seasoned,
Yes. That's also a good one.
legends. We'll sugarcoat them. And so I feel like it left a bad taste in people's mouths when it didn't need to go that route, and
Right.
it almost felt like the Nomadland win was a side note, and especially like I don't understand how like they're gonna debut the new West Side Story trailer, and then we're gonna have Rita Moreno give out Best Picture. It's like it's handed right to you to do this. and you screw it up. Like
Right.
I just don't get it.
Yeah, and let's talk about Chadwick Boseman for a second because it's look, I am not. I'm not an advocate of giving somebody awards simply because they
Mhm.
passed and it's sad.
Yeah.
Like the fact is, and we just watched The Father here this past weekend, so it's very fresh in my mind. And I said when we watched it, I to my wife, I was like, if it was any other year, he'd be a shoe in to win because he's that good in
Yeah.
it. Anthony Hopkins, like he's so good in it, and like aside from Chadwick Boseman's fate, like if you look at both of those performances, they're both really, really excellent. And I can't be mad that Anthony Hopkins won. What I'm mad about and what everybody else should be mad about is just the way they structured it. But the people that are out there crying like Chadwick Boseman was robbed, he was snubbed, like have you seen The Father? And like that's what I mean. Like how many people have actually seen it? And on a side note, Eric, I don't know if you've seen clips from Frank Langella's performance.
Oh,
Of
on Broadway.
Father.
Uh, I did see a few.
Right. And like
Frank
he's really
Langella had a better speech when he won the Tony than Hopkins had last night. I'll say that. But
that,
yeah,
Frank Langella is a phenomenal actor, but Anthony Hopkins, it was a different level of acting to me in that movie. And obviously, you're comparing movie to play, so it's kind of apples to oranges in a certain degree. But like,
well, they both are. Ma Rainey also a play.
right, yeah, it's a different like it was just it was really great. So it's a shame the way it was structured because people are looking at it in different ways. Um, but you can't really. It's tough to be mad at Anthony Hopkins for winning. He was very gracious in his reaction to it. So
Yeah, I think that's also why the ordering of events was like doing no favors to Anthony Hopkins either.
right,
Like I feel like not that he gives a shit, but not that he cares. You see him on the field just waking up. I don't think he cares, but I think that yeah, I think a lot of people are like, well, it's like his like best performance like in his career. It also so like definitely deserved, but it feels a little bit slighted because he's now seen because of the whole framing of the way that they ordered these things out.
right.
It made it seem like someone compared it to the ending of Sopranos, where it's like what, and then it cuts to black, and you don't know what the hell just happened. And it was not the
Right.
ending you expected that they were leading up to. But I mean, Gandolfini dies. Let's be honest. They're in the diner. But so you just didn't know. So it was just. I think we've definitely, hopefully, knock on wood, learned never to do this again. Never to. I mean, if this would have been 2008, would we have ended with Best Supporting Actor because we assumed Heath Ledger was going to win? It would have been strange. It wouldn't have. It wouldn't have made any. I mean, it would have made.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like why are we even going down that road? Like
Yeah.
why move it this way? Like Heath Ledger was as much of a lock as people thought Chadwick Boseman was, but they
Hmm.
kept it where it was supposed to be in the ceremony. Like
Yeah.
it was somewhat of a foolish mistake. Like because I wonder if anybody when they decided to restructure and reorder this, if anybody raised their hand and said, "Why?" Like just like why are we doing this? Well, because that's not a good enough reason.
Yeah, or you know what they could have even done now that I'm just trying to think of ways they could have done damage control. Uh, do the in memoriam to close out the show? Maybe I don't know. Like because they did have Angela Bassett, who was of course in Black Panther and stuff. Present in memoriam, and
Right.
Boseman was the last name or the first. I think it was the last name.
He was the last one. Yep.
Last. So that would have at least felt a little bit, I don't know, kinder or whatever. And I think of all the years to have in memoriam close the show, this would have made sense. But it just seems so short-sighted.
Do
In
we
that.
know for a fact that they sped through that the way they did because they were short on time?
I
Or
have
was that
that I don't
because
know.
here's what I'll say. A lot of people didn't like the in memoriam segment. I didn't mind it, and here's why. Because they didn't give special attention to really anybody except Chadwick Boseman.
Hmm.
And you understood why they lingered on that one a little bit longer at the very end. But by and large, they just went through it really quick. There were so many people, you can't really say they're giving preferential treatment to this person and that person. Like, they just went through it, and that was it. So I didn't hate it. I mean, some
Yeah,
people though. So
I mean, for me, the hardest thing was that like it was sometimes hard to like read them in real
yeah,
time
that's true.
before, like you couldn't even register who that you had to like. It felt like you had to like. I just need to keep reading fast because it was like what would you say, like 1 second each, maybe
Yeah,
1.5 seconds
yeah,
each.
just about, yeah.
And I think of it like, of course, like if you do that and it gets more names on there, then do it that way because at the end of the day, it's for the families, right? So the families
Right.
see it and appreciate that they're on there, and it'll be remembered for that. They and also it concluded with a with like a URL to go to the Academy site to see even more names. So when people were complaining about where's Jessica Walter, where's a bunch of other notable filmmakers that passed away.
Right.
They, if you went to that link, you would see the complete in memoriam with those names as well. That's not the same as being on the telecast, but I
And you
mean, I
wonder if
understand.
there's any perfect way to do that segment. Like, because we've seen it every which way. Now this year we've seen it sped up. Like, what is the perfect way? Is there a perfect way? I really have come to the conclusion that there is no perfect way to do it.
No, no, because normally people will complain that, oh, they should shut the audience sound off because some will applaud louder
Right.
for certain names versus other names. And so we removed that. And yes, it's very, very fast. But at the end of the day, it's meant to be shared, and I can watch it tonight and go frame by frame if I wanted to.
Right.
If I definitely have the time, but I'm not going to do that. But you could go frame by frame and see exactly who was mentioned, if you chose to. So I didn't mind that as much. That just seemed like something for people to complain about, like always.
So yeah, I mean, that's we kind of touched on all the big things. I mean, one other thing I'll touch on just to wrap up here is that they pushed the best song performances to before the show. And look, on one hand, this was one of the worst years for that category. So people might be quick to say, "Oh, who cares?" I like the songs being on the ceremony. I like that those performances can kind of break up the ceremony a little bit, and maybe make things a little bit looser or whatever. So the fact that they were pushed to the beginning, it's I don't know, it's not to make another wrestling reference, but it's like akin to a dark match. Yeah.
Yeah, especially like a friend of mine told me that at like 2 p.m. they're like, "Oh, the pre-show is starting." I'm like, "Isn't the ceremony start at 8? Like, what the hell are they doing at 2 o'clock?"
Right. Yeah.
And I think they were airing the songs, they were doing interviews, they were
Yeah, we had it on all day in
I
my
don't know,
house.
talking about the Academy Museum opening soon in the summer and
Yeah.
stuff, which really is cool. But it definitely felt the song thing I think would have been tough to do just given the space, the Union Station space. So you couldn't perform on there.
That's true.
Um,
That's true.
yeah, so that would be the only. I was a little frustrated that I assumed going into the ceremony that they were going to be alternating between Union Station and the Dolby Theater, and that did
Right.
not really turn out to be the case. We turned on all the lights to let Bryan Cranston come in, so we could introduce a bunch of geriatrics and stuff. But like, it didn't. That didn't really make any. Why did you do that? Like I thought it was going to be a mix of the two, especially because the Dolby Theater can seat like 2,000 people, so social
Right.
distancing would be easy.
True.
And
Right.
you can get them on the stage, and you can have a further back camera to get the traditional TV angles that you couldn't get in Union Station. So you'd have like you'd never have the winners speaking directly at the camera. They'd be like their eye line would be off to the left or something. Um, so yeah, the song thing I missed, but I understand why they didn't do it given the spatial limitations.
Right.
Um,
Well, you know, so Eric, what do you think? Let's wrap up here with maybe our suggestions of what they can change in the future. Some quick bullet points. So, like, what do you think for next year? What do you think that they should change back to or improve?
um, I I can hardly tell you about certain production elements of last year's, but I don't remember having many complaints. So I mean, the traditional order of things, ending with Best Picture as the culmination, the summation of what a production is. Let's never, go against that again.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree. Yeah.
I mean, that should be obvious. Other than that, I mean, I missed not having a few like montages. Like some of them are usually lazy, like the magic of the movies, blah blah
Right.
blah. But I felt like in a year in which theaters were closed and blah, you really could have done something.
Yes, you know what?
They
You just
they
brought up
didn't.
a point to me that
Yeah.
I totally forgot about until you just mentioned the montages, which is that the theater chains, if you recall, wanted them to
Oh, yeah.
boldly advocate for people going
Come
back
back.
to the theaters.
Right.
They
Right.
didn't do that at all.
No, not at all.
Like,
Not at
not
all.
even a little bit. And like to your point about the montages, as a kid, that's the stuff I loved. I
Yeah.
didn't know about a lot of those movies, but some of them looked really moving in those montages. And so you mental note those things and you go to see those movies when you get older or whatever. And I love that kind of stuff, even, despite the fact that, as you say, some of them are are genuinely just like lazily thrown together.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, they definitely didn't do the theater chains any favors. But
There was no sense of the going to the theater communal experience. There was none of that. And I mean, when the leading studio was Netflix with 7 Oscars,
right,
that is our new reality. And when you can see all these things now via streaming, perhaps they're going to move further away from encouraging I don't miss the segments where a host would go down the street to the Chinese man theater and speak to Joe Blow about what he's purchasing a ticket to, and we'd all
right.
laugh. I don't miss that kind of stuff. But it does seem weird that the nostalgic element of movies that you really could have pulled on now, because we haven't been able to be together at a movie theater, was just never even touched upon.
And
That
you
felt strange.
mentioning Netflix reminds me about Ricky Gervais's speech at the Golden Globes, which I rewatched today because he posted it on his Twitter account, and where he says, I feel like all I had to do was come in here and just say, "Congratulations, Netflix, good job," and
Yeah,
call it a night.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that was their big thing the next day is like, oh, we won 7. You can watch them all right now if you have a
Right,
Netflix subscription. You can watch them all. You don't have to go to a theater. You can watch them tonight if you'd like.
right.
And that seems like we've quickly jumped to that being the new reality, which is a whole other thing. But
Yeah,
yeah,
we've talked about that ad nauseum on some of our other shows, the
yeah,
changes in movie watching. But yeah, no, I concur with what you were saying. And I think in general, I think next year they need to embrace tradition a little bit more, and they need to build on that. As far as a host goes, I don't know. Like, I am okay with the lack of host if the people you're getting to do the presentations and the segments makes sense.
mhm,
This year it didn't make as much sense to me. Like, the people that they chose for certain things, I don't think built that energy enough, and the ratings certainly reflect that. So I think next year they're probably going to take a long, hard look at whether or not they want to keep the no host thing going. Billy Crystal is okay with the fact that they didn't call him. So
he's like, I can't write songs for each of these nominees anymore. But yeah, I do think the way to get around a lot of that has been just choosing presenters that could potentially have something to do with the potential winner.
right.
And if not, that's okay too. But I do remember, like, uh, Jane Fonda giving Best Picture to Parasite, or and there was no necessarily connection between them, but there was like a special moment.
Yeah,
Whereas that may be better. You don't need to go fully back to the host idea. But yeah,
absolutely. Well, um, that's it for me, Eric. What do you think? I think we covered it all, right?
I mean, I think that's it. I mean, I was a little upset that we've lost sound mixing, but I got over it by the time the show ended. Um,
Tenet,
yeah, I
Tenet
mean,
is an Oscar winner now.
that's
Would
true.
you
Yeah,
be
it is. I
interested
still
to
haven't
see
seen
it
it. I
still?
still haven't seen it, but
Yeah, it's
hopefully in the future. Also, I guess due to the pandemic and COVID restrictions, after someone presented an Oscar, they had to not be on the stage at the same time as the person who won. They had to come like when Renee Zellweger was like Frances McDormand, she then walked off the stage before Frances McDormand even got on the stage. I don't know if that was because you had to
Well,
do that.
it's funny you mentioned
or
that because Brad Pitt did that as well, and
yeah,
and,
that
you know,
became a
and
joke.
the grandmother from Minari was about to trip, and I was like,
Yeah.
I remember I was saying in my house, I was like, Brad, you need to move over there and help her out a little bit.
Yeah, it seems like they were told that they couldn't
Yeah,
do that,
yeah.
or that like the Oscar could not be handed. It had to be like just be on the podium when they got up there.
They're just gonna throw it at people as they come up the steps. So
I think that's fair. Yeah, but other than that, yeah, no complaints. It was nice to see Susan Choi, Bong Joon Ho's translator again. She
yeah,
became somewhat of a star last year. I popped for her when she showed up. Even though he was in like the dark and like I don't think he knew he had to walk down the aisle of his theater that he was in South Korea, but it all worked out. It all worked out, and he showed the envelope. I like now since
I
the
love
hiccup of
that.
20.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I love that.
Yeah, I think that was fine, and that was a great kismet moment of having a Korean director give to a Chinese director. And I mean, he won last year too, so that was not planned out like that. But that
Right.
was something that I think when you don't force the cyclical ironicness of one winner to another, then it becomes more genuine. So that was nice too.
Right. And I'll just end on a note of I thought my octopus teacher was really overrated.
It's
And
not good. It was. I would say it's the worst of the five. I mean,
it's a little creepy. Am I right? Come on.
yeah,
It's
and I mean, look,
a little creepy.
we've seen Uncle Boon Me, we've seen Shape of Water. Look, I'm all down for whatever, but I mean, I'm not personally down for it, but if someone's down, but I just felt like it was the worst of the five, and that's actually why I predicted it, and people were predicting it because I'm like, oh, this is very accessible. And later in the night, there was a Google commercial about octopus, so I'm like, oh, this feels all so strategized.
You're right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they were never going to go for collective, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But hopefully more people seek it out now because that did have clips, that category. So
Absolutely. And the people, a couple of the stars from Crip Camp were there as well.
yeah, great positioning. I feel like Jim Lebrecht was like always in sight line.
He was. Yeah. Yeah.
In that first row. So when they did that shot on the right side, you could always see him in the corner. So so that was cool. Yeah.
Well, next year we will see what happens. For Eric, my name is Chad. Thank you for joining us. Check out my other show, The Nitty Gritty. Let us know what you thought about the Oscars, and we will see you next week.